Mere hours after being named as Donald Trump's future attorney general, controversial MAGA Republican Congressman Matt Gaetz did something so abrupt and unexpected that even his fellow Republican congressmen were taken totally by surprise. He resigned from Congress effective immediately, months before Trump will be inaugurated, months before Gaetz himself could possibly be confirmed to the position of attorney general by the Senate, and with the House Republican majority already razor thin. So now Republican Speaker Mike Johnson is scrambling to come up with a credible excuse for why Gaetz did what he did. But in fact, there is a much more relevant and much more sinister reason for Gaetz to have resigned when he did and how he did, and we have to talk about it. But before we do, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, we got a couple of clips to look at in this video. So again, Matt Gaetz, perhaps the most controversial and least qualified selections of Donald Trump's various nominees to White House senior staff or the cabinet. It's pretty close when you consider that he also nominated a Fox News host to be Secretary of Defense. I mean, this is just insane. So Gaetz resigned, taking everybody by surprise, including Mike Johnson. We're going to hear what Mike Johnson has to say in terms of the reason proffered. This is why Matt Gaetz did what he did. And then after Mike Johnson is done lying to your face, I'm going to give you the real reason.
I got to know Matt very well. Look, I'll say this. Everyone who served with him will tell you he's one of the most intelligent members of Congress. He's an accomplished attorney. He's very concerned about the lawfare that has been occurring in the Department of Justice under the Biden administration, and the fact that the American people have lost their faith in our institutions of justice because of everything that they've seen. He's a reformer in his mind and heart, and I think that he'll bring a lot to the table on that. I think out of deference to us, he issued his resignation letter effective immediately of Congress. That caught us by surprise a little bit, but I asked him what the reasoning was, and he said, well, you can't have too many absences. So under Florida state law, there's about an 8-week period to select and fill a vacant seat. And so by doing so today, that allows me, I've already placed a call to Governor DeSantis in Florida and said, let's start the clock. He's in Italy at the moment, and so we're going to talk first thing in the morning about this. And if we start the clock now, if you do the math, we may be able to fill that seat as early as January 3rd when we take the new oath of office for the new Congress.
So that's the reason that they're going with, hey, listen, I'm kind of screwing you over now, but that's because you need the numbers. And if you get Governor Ron DeSantis to call a special election so my seat can be, my vacancy can be filled, it would preserve the numbers. Now, if you squint, you might think, okay, that makes sense, maybe. But there's actually a much more compelling and sinister reason for Gaetz to have done what he did. And now I'm about to share it with you. According to the New York Times, a House ethics panel was set to release its report critical of Matt Gaetz. The House Ethics Committee, led by Republicans, by the way, which has been investigating allegations that Gaetz engaged in sexual misconduct and illicit drug use, was prepared to vote to release a highly critical report about Gaetz on Friday, according to a Republican official familiar with the matter. The release would have come 2 days after Trump selected Gaetz to be Attorney General. Gaetz, a Florida Republican, abruptly resigned from his House seat late Wednesday, effectively ending the ethics investigation that has hung over his head for years. Gaetz, the official said, had repeatedly offered combative replies to questions posed by the committee, effectively delaying the fact-finding process for months. The publication of the committee's findings was additionally delayed, the official said, because of a House rule that forbids releasing a negative report close to an election. The official spoke on condition of anonymity to discuss a sensitive investigation. Now, with Gaetz's departure from Congress, the committee no longer has jurisdiction to investigate him. It was not immediately clear whether it would still release its findings. This is the key part. So not only did he kill an investigation into him, which was at least winding down, now as a consequence of him resigning, it's not clear if the Ethics Committee will release its findings. Tom Russ, the chief counsel and staff director for the panel, declined to comment. Republicans in Congress expressed shock at Gaetz' selection to be Attorney General. Gaetz, who led the successful effort last fall to oust Republican Speaker Kevin McCarthy of California, is one of the most reviled members of his conference. For 2 years, the Justice Department looked into allegations that he had an inappropriate sexual relationship with a 17-year-old girl and possibly violated federal sex trafficking laws. The department closed its investigation last year without filing any charges against Gaetz. Still, the Ethics Committee opened an inquiry in 2021 into the sexual misconduct allegations, along with claims that Gaetz misused state identification records, converted campaign funds for personal use, accepted impermissible gifts under House rules, and shared inappropriate images or videos on the House floor, among other transgressions. Gaetz has tried to turn the allegations against him into a badge of honor. Quote, "I am the most investigated man in the United States Congress," end quote, Mr. Gaetz said when the ethics inquiry when it began, insinuating that the inquiry was merely a punishment for undermining McCarthy's leadership. Now, the reason that doesn't follow is McCarthy didn't become the Republican Speaker of the House until January 2023. And the inquiry into him by the Republican-led House Ethics Committee began in 2021, 2 years prior. So the math doesn't math on that one. Gaetz's resignation complicates the math for House Republicans who effectively won control of the chamber on Wednesday night, according to the Associated Press. They are on track to have a tiny majority, and with Gaetz departing, they will be down one seat from the start. Okay. That's the real reason. And we're going to get into the possibility of this report being released despite Gaetz's resignation. But the first thing you should immediately understand is that it at least puts it in the air. Before Gaetz's resignation was publicly announced, Miller suggested that if the Senate hearings unearthed new and convincing evidence that the misconduct allegations against Gaetz were true, his colleagues could expel him as they did George Santos late last year. Okay. Miller said that he and other House Republicans were shocked that Gaetz agreed to participate in the Senate confirmation hearings, which would involve rigorous and invasive background checks. Quote, "I'm surprised Matt would do this to himself," end quote, Mr. Miller said. Quote, "I want to go get a big bag of popcorn and pull up a front row seat to that show." So on the topic of whether or not the report will be released, this is what the Washington Post has to say. While the panel no longer has jurisdiction to punish a former member, the bipartisan panel could vote to release the report publicly if a majority of committee members agreed to do so, or to transmit it to the Justice Department or to the Senate Ethics Committee. So it was unclear in the first article about whether the report would be released. The Washington Post clarified that it could be released if a majority of committee members on the Ethics Committee voted to do so, or they could transfer it to the Justice Department or the Senate Ethics Committee. Okay, fair enough. Well, then Fox News weighs in on this. So, according to, let me get this guy's name exactly correct. Guest is his name. House Ethics Committee Chair Michael Guest, a Republican from Mississippi. This is his quote, according to Fox News. Quote, "I've been asked, does this call us to expedite our investigation? Once an investigation is complete, then a report will be issued," Guest said, assuming that at that time, Gaetz is still a member of Congress. If Gaetz were to resign because he's taking a position with the administration as the Attorney General, then the Ethics Committee loses its jurisdiction at that point. This is the key part. Once we lose jurisdiction, there would not be a report that would be issued. That's not unique to this case. So it's unclear about whether the report will be released. The report could be released even now if a majority on the Ethics Committee vote to do so. But the chair of the Ethics Committee is strongly signaling that if Gaetz is resigned, if he has left Congress by the time the committee is prepared to release the report, then they probably won't release the report. That's the reason why Matt Gaetz resigned from Congress when he did and how he did. That's the real reason. And Senate Democrats have noticed. This is the Senate Judiciary Committee official Twitter page, which as of right now is controlled by the Democrats. It won't be after this new Congress is instated because Republicans took the majority in the Senate in the last election. But this is what the Democratic-led Senate Judiciary Committee has to say now. Make no mistake, the information in the House Ethics Committee's report into former Representative Matt Gaetz could still be relevant to his confirmation as the next Attorney General. It must be preserved and shared with the committee. The chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, currently led by Democrats, Dick Durbin, said this: "My thoughts on the House Ethics Committee report concerning allegations into former Representative Matt Gaetz. In light of Donald Trump's selection of Matt Gaetz to be his Attorney General, I'm calling on the House Ethics Committee to preserve and share the report and all relevant documentation on Gaetz with the Senate Judiciary Committee. The sequence and timing of Gaetz's resignation from the House raises serious questions about the contents of the House Ethics report. We cannot allow this valuable information from a bipartisan investigation to be hidden from the American people. Make no mistake, this information could be relevant to the question of Gaetz's confirmation as the next Attorney General of the United States, and our constitutional responsibility of advice and consent. So there you have it, folks. Donald Trump nominated this wildly unqualified, highly controversial MAGA Republican congressman to be his attorney general. And then, in an attempt to either delay or cripple a bipartisan ethics investigation into him and to prevent its findings from being released to the public, Gaetz abruptly resigned from Congress in a way which potentially screws his Republican majority. And so now Senate Democrats are saying, hey, we see you. We want that report. Make sure you preserve it. Whether or not the ethics committee will publicly release the report, whether or not the ethics committee will comply with Dick Durbin's request to transmit it to the Senate Judiciary Committee, and whether or not the Republican-led Senate Judiciary Committee, which will be the version of the committee that will question Matt Gaetz for his confirmation process, whether or not they will care about this remains to be seen. It's a lot of if. But the fact is, this is why Matt Gaetz did what he did. And anyone who tells you otherwise is very naive. And Mike Johnson is lying to your face when he wants you to believe that it was really about preserving the math of the Republican majority. Nonsense. In the meantime, let me know what you think in the comments.